Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the WODcast podcast. I am your host, Eddie Ifft, and I'm so excited today because we have a guest that I have wanted on this show for so long, since the beginning of the show, going back almost, 9 years or whatever we've been doing this. I have always wanted to have Robb Wolf on the show, could never get in the same place with him. Now, thanks to doing the show on Zoom, I've got him. I nailed him down. I got Robb Wolf. Ladies and gentlemen, Robb Wolf from the Paleo Solution, Sacred Cow, best-selling author, 2 books. He's developed a product called LMNT, I call it LMNT. You'll hear in the show. He's just a genius, microbiologist, like really interesting guy, really fun guy. Was big in the CrossFit world, loves jiu-jitsu, knows everything about nutrition. I shouldn't say everything. I exaggerate. We all know I'm an embellisher. This guy's factual. He's all about science. Fun to talk to. So interesting to listen to because he's got so much information. This is one. Get your notebook out. Get ready because he's so good and so much. This one's packed full of information. I'm not very funny, but if you want to see me be funny, you can come to the Omaha Funny Bone this week. I'll be performing Friday and Saturday night in Omaha. That's this week. Yeah, that's the 24th and 25th. Then I go right to Las Vegas. I'll be in Las Vegas on the 27th through the 3rd. So that's 27, 28, 29, 30, 1, 2, 3. Is that right? Oh, there's a 31st. Does this make sense? I don't know. Yeah, there's the 31st. No, wait, we're in September. There's a 30. What am I thinking? I was looking at August. Yeah, 20, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 1, 2. You can see me in Las Vegas at Brad Garrett's Comedy Club in Las Vegas. Come out and see me. Brad headlines. Brad MCs the show because he likes to showcase us, but you come to see Brad and then you get me. Brad is amazing though, and he's so funny and he stays on for a while. He's just a great guy. It's the nicest club in Las Vegas. Come out and see him. Send me messages too, Ifft@yahoo.com. You want me to come to your gym? I'll do a show at your gym. I don't care, especially if I'm in town. We can work something out. We can do a fundraiser. We can split the deal. We can, whatever. You want to raise money for a charity, for your gym, whatever. I'm there for you guys. Let's get this done. Message me, WODcastpodcast@yahoo.com. That's best to do because other people will read it then, not just me. And it'll probably get done. When it goes straight to me, it doesn't get done because I'm not a go-getter. I'm drinking some LMNT right now. So good. Anyways, you want to help out the show? Go on iTunes and review the show. Please, the iTunes podcast app, just review it, please. I just want to get over 1,000 reviews. And I read them on the show, so you can make them funny. I'll read it. I haven't had one since like mid-August. Can I just get a review? That's all I want. Or if you don't want a review, send us $5 through our Patreon, patreon.com/WODcastPodcast or WODcastPodcast.com/Patreon. And you get 5 episodes a month opposed to 4. And you also can win a leopard claw or a Myopux. Myopux is an electronic muscle stimulator that you use on your body when you have injuries. You will have an injury at some point. At that point, it's too late. You will not own one. Get one before you get injured so that you can fix your injury. Leopard Paw does the same thing. Leopard Paw helps with your injuries. They're 2 completely different things. One's an electronic muscle stimulator, pumps your muscles to get new blood and nutrients in there. The other's a scraper, like a schwagwa. I don't know how you pronounce that. It's like a Graston, and you use it to scrape the injured area to kind of scrape up the adhesions, which end up in your fascia between your skin and your muscle, and they prevent blood from flowing there. Well, now you scrape those out. You scrape them. They go away. Blood gets there. These 2 work in conjunction with each other. They work with each other, or they can work apart from each other. But you want these. And listen, if you donate $5 a month, you're in a drawing to get one. And guess what? There's a pretty damn good chance you're going to win one, if you know what I mean. Wink, wink. So all that is $5 a month. Sign up for our Patreon and you will probably win. So let's big shout out and thank you to Maya Pucks and Leopard Paw for doing that. Live shows. I talked about Omaha, Nebraska and Vegas, but I'm also going to be everywhere. I'm going to be in Reno. I'm going to be in Boston. I'm going to be in Pittsburgh. I'm going to be in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm going to be in Wasilla, Alaska. I'm going to be in what other cities do I have coming up? Naples, Florida. I have Key West, Florida. Wilmington, North Carolina. Plano, Texas was canceled. Plano was canceled. Check out all my dates at eddieifft.com. I do a lot of local shows when I'm in town in LA. So come out and see me live before I record my new special January 22nd at the Irvine Improv in here in California. I'm going to need to sell that out. So I need CrossFit gyms coming out. Bring the whole gym. I will comp your entire gym because I need to sell 2 shows. That's 1,000 tickets I need to sell or seat. I need the butts in the seats. So when I record this special, and you need to laugh like you just watched somebody fall off a 15-foot rope climb. All right. Because it needs to look good on film. January 22nd, Irvine Improv at the Irvine Spectrum. What else? Oh, I want to talk about Hunter Academy. Hunter McIntyre has his Hunter's Academy of Strength. They come up with every year they do a thing called OCR Stars. This is season 2. It was big success last year. They're doing it again this year. Starts November 1st. It's 3 weeks long. It's just like the Open. It's virtual workouts. You're going to need to film yourself, whole thing. These are more running oriented. They're more like obstacle course racing. But they do give you like CrossFit kind of exercises in between. CrossFitter could do very well in it. There are cash prizes. Check out big cash prizes. But also one person that signs up. I'm signing up. I want to win a Jeep. I know everybody's going to think it's corrupt if I win it, but I'm signing up. Or I might just have my kid sign up. So then she has a car when she's 16. That's 10 years from now. Oh, well, you can win a brand new Jeep just for signing up. And look, they're trying to promote OCR racing, get it back to what it was before COVID. So check it out. So you go to Hunter's Academy of Strength, or he might even have OCRstars.com. Go to Hunter McIntyre on Instagram. It's all over his Instagram page, but check it out. Sign up. Should be really fun. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do some of his dumb workouts, even though he scares my daughter all the time and sends her clown paintings. But it's a good thing. The OCR Stars. So check it out. OCR Stars. I think that's it. I want to get on to Robb Wolf, and because I just had such a great time talking to him. It's a long one. I couldn't. I actually don't talk that much in this one. I ask questions and I listen because he's so interesting. And I always say that to people. People are more interesting. I shut up and listen. So bring it when you're on this show. Next week, Justin Medeiros, the fittest man in the world, will be on the show. How about that? That's it. Let's get the show going. I have tried.
What's going on?
I mean, God, you've made me feel so small, so little, just trying to track you down.
I just wanted you to work for it a little bit. You know,
I did. I worked my ass off.
Yeah. We had, flowers, first date, some gentle petting, caressing.
And I had to go out and start drinking gallons of LMNT.
Well, there was that colonoscopy pending. So, I mean, the correlation, causation, I don't know that it had anything to do with me. So
every time you talk, you send me on a tangent that I want to go, oh, let's talk about that right now. Let's talk about that right now. As soon as you said colonoscopy, I was like, I have 72 questions to ask you. I feel like you have limited time because you're now not only an author, but you're a businessman. And I want to try to be as efficient as possible, but I have so much to ask you.
Go wild, go crazy. Just talk quickly.
Let's start with the fact that I think I was the first person to introduce Joe Rogan to grass-fed grass-fed cattle, like grass-fed cows, and after reading your book.
Oh,
And,
okay. Okay.
and we're going to go back to like, I mean, this might've been 2012.
Okay.
I forget how long ago I was on his podcast, and I just started spouting like I knew what I was talking about, but I had just read your book and I'm like, I know
I
everything.
wrote a book very much along similar lines. So I assumed, this affect that like I knew what I was talking about, and people believe me.
Okay. So with that also, as I drank the Kool-Aid at CrossFit and got completely addicted to everything they said. And I'm not a religious person, but I found out I could join a cult very easily. And I fought it. I fought it so hard. I became the guy that joined the cult, but tries to start another cult. Like I was
to improve on that cult.
Yeah, like I was one of the Branch Davidians that branched off.
Okay.
And I remember you being a big advocate of fish oil.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to that?
It's funny. Around the time of the first book, there was some decent research, and also some people like Barry Sears, Charles Poliquin, who were recommending some pretty high fish oil intake. And then when we started poking around and looking at how quickly fish oil consumed dietarily can even be added to like the cell membranes of red blood cells and throughout the body, there's kind of a choke point there. And there was a suggestion that if you take anything above this level, that you're just kind of wasting it. And so that was kind of the thought for a period of time. And then as time has gone on, we've realized that even the fish oil that's not getting incorporated directly into the cell membranes, that definitely has an anti-inflammatory effect and mitigates all these prostaglandins and all this stuff, but the spillover still has an anti-inflammatory effect. So it's almost like we've gone full circle. There was this like really high dose fish oil period of time, then a more modest period. Now there's a point where for different applications, people are recommending higher dose fish oil. There was an experiment, and with everything, there in biology, there's kind of a U curve where too little of something is probably bad. There's probably some sort of a Goldilocks optimum, and then too much of something could be problematic too. But there was a study, God, it's got to be over 10 years ago, but they actually used exceptionally high dose fish oil in organ transplants. And I think that this was an animal model, but they were actually able to suppress the immune response sufficiently to allow for organ transplantation in these critters. And normally you need to use some sort of an immunosuppressant drug. So these very high dose fish oil intakes definitely can modify the immune response. Most people are chronically overinflamed, have an overactive immune response. And it's not to say you want to go out and chug a bottle of fish oil, but it definitely, it's interesting. Like it's just these really complex systems, like we learn, and then we learn something new, and we have to go back and then kind of look at it clinically. I think we're really discovering that there's across a population that different recommendations can have greater or lesser efficacy. Like something that kind of blows my mind is it's generally accepted that the half-life of caffeine when folks consume it is about 8 hours. So like if I consume 100 milligrams of caffeine, which is about a stout cup of coffee, 8 hours later, I'll still have 50 milligrams of caffeine in my system. But the crazy thing is some people, the half-life is 4 hours, and some people, the half-life is almost 36 hours.
I'm the 36 hours. I'm the 36. I can't have it at all.
Yeah. And it sounds crazy because you'll have one guy standing there, one gal standing there, and they can drink coffee all day long and they just metabolize it just about as fast as it comes in. And then folks like you and I, you can get backlogged with it. Like you can be awake, you can have terrible sleep for multiple days. Yeah. And not everything in biology has that big of a spectrum, but I think it's a great reminder that as similar as we all are, there are unique individual considerations.
Sure.
And that's where we have to consider things like exercise dosing and fish oil and stuff like that. Like you do the best you can with the guidelines, but like there maybe end up being a lot of variation for that individual.
Yeah, a buddy of mine who is an ophthalmologist told me when he went to med school, he goes, that's what you learn. The human bodies are so different. Like you'll go to cut in to go, find some tendon or something and it won't be there on
Right.
someone. He goes, it'll be lower down the arm, or it'll be, he's just like, there are so many anomalies and so many different things that the way we're built that generally we're all like this, but there's all these weird things that go on. When you talk about inflammation, which we all experience, and it's a problem for all of us, and there's so many different things that fight inflammation, whether it be omega-3 fatty acids, whether it be, I'm a big fan of curcumin. I take lots of, not lots of curcumin, but I take it rather than taking ibuprofen. And I don't know if it does the same thing, because I took ibuprofen one time during a race and it was like a miracle drug. I've never felt that with curcumin, but all the studies I read say that it's comparable. When we're fighting inflammation in our bodies, where is that inflammation? Is it just at our injured spots? Is it in our blood? Where is it existing?
That's a good question. And it kind of depends. So like, I was cutting some wood a couple of days ago, and I stepped on a nail. And the nail went through my shoe, and it didn't go super deep into my foot, but it went in a little bit. And I was like, I'm not getting a tetanus shot. I'm gonna roll the dice on that. But it was a nail that I knew where it came from. It hasn't been out in the soil for super long, so we'll see. But I had some redness and some inflammation right around the spot where that thing went in, and so that's some localized inflammation where my immune response is ramping up mast cells and these white blood cells to try to stop anything right there at the source. No bacteria, no viruses, no parasites, would make it in. So it gets red and irritated and inflamed. If somebody gets poison oak as an example, or a mosquito bite, it's not the poison oak is a really interesting long chain fat that goes through our skin, and then it irritates the immune system. And similarly, like a mosquito bite, the material that's in the saliva of the mosquito could be benign to us, but our immune system gets pissed off at it, and it creates this red welt. So those are local immune responses, and it's usually trying to prevent bacteria, viral infiltration throughout our body. Smoking, eating a very high glycemic load diet, certain types of medications can cause inflammation on a systemic level. And so that's where we would see markers of like C-reactive protein or glyc-A that are elevated systemically. And that's where like neuroinflammation, damage to the vascular beds that would accelerate or potentiate like a cardiovascular disease. That's where that stuff is happening on a more global level. So if you get a traumatic brain injury, if you bump your head really hard, you can and will end up with brain inflammation. So it'll be a localized immune response. The thing that I think is interesting is the way that we live in this kind of modern world. We don't eat generally as well as we should. We don't sleep in particular as well as we should, like the time we should go to bed and the duration spent, asleep. A little bit of fasting, although I think people have gone crazy on the intermittent fasting. Like I think once you get to a lean body level and you figure out a good protein intake, so you have maintenance, I'm not sure how much more benefit there is for fasting other than some really targeted situations. But I think a lot of people eat too frequently. And so that constant influx of food, it causes a little bit of a systemic inflammatory response. So we have potential inflammation anywhere locally, and locally could be in the brain, it could be in the heart, it could be, the nail that went through my boot and went in my foot, or we have this systemic inflammation that happens on a more global level. And I mean, fighting COVID and whatnot, like the thing that really gets people isn't the virus itself, it's an overactive immune response to the viral pathology that then leads into like blood clots and
so let me interrupt you there, because I have 17 questions now. Right there, when you talk about like an overreactive immune response to something like COVID, I asked Dr. Drew early on in COVID on the show, I said, I worry about, you know, like they always say, oh, you're a young, healthy man or whatever. You shouldn't worry about COVID. And I said, but what about that kind of overreactive response from having too good of an immune system, from your immune system going, oh, I'll destroy this thing, and then filling your body with mast cells. And because a couple times I've had colds in my life where I've had kind of an asthmatic response. That's what the doctor called it. And I was like, I don't understand. No one has asthma in my family. I've never had it. And he's like, basically your immune system like went nuts and really tried to fight this off. So is that an argument against having too good of an immune system? I don't know if I do. I just...
In a way it is. And I mean, this is, I think, something that just more globally, and I don't know if it's all that interesting. I find this stuff interesting, but biology is about trade-offs. Like if you're very, very tall, you have the potential to be a pretty good basketball player. You're going to suck as a gymnast, you know, and vice versa. If you're very fast twitch, you're never going to be an elite endurance athlete, you know. And so there are these trade-offs. A really active immune response means that you probably won't get cancer. Doesn't guarantee it, but like it's stacking the deck in a direction that makes it less likely to get a whole host of cancers. You might get cardiovascular disease and autoimmunity more likely though, or you could have this overactive, you know, response to bacteria or viral pathogens. So, and this is the amazing thing that our immune system, like there's more information processing arguably that happens in or via our immune system than happens in our brain, because it's basically sorting out the whole world that we interact with. It deals with the stuff coming through our gut when we eat food and all the, you know, bacteria and junk that you know, it interfaces with there, the stuff that we inhale, the stuff that we consume, you know, orally when we drink and eat. And so there's a ton of information processing there, and the body has to sort out, is this thing that's coming in dangerous? Is it part of myself? Is it something foreign? You know, just trying to figure out cancer, that's a part of us that just gets changed in a way that then becomes pathological, and it's not an entirely easy thing for the body to sort that out. And so you know, an interesting example of this like overactive immune response is the 1918 flu pandemic, which currently, like with COVID, the average age of death is like 82 years old. That's the median age of death. So half the people that have died due to COVID were older than 82 years old. They're older than what life expectancy is, average life expectancy is. With that 1918 flu pandemic, the median age of death was 28 years old. So
what was the average lifespan at that time though? Was it much lower? Were we like in the
I mean, it was 1918. It was definitely lower, but it wasn't like super low. But these were understood to be the healthiest people. The people who died the most then were not children and were not the elderly. It was like the really robust working years people that, and it's thought that 1918 H1N1 variety of flu creates what's called a cytokine storm. Like it creates this feed forward mechanism where the inflammation begets inflammation, and it's very hard to turn that stuff off. And this was before corticosteroids and even using some of these, there's been some interesting application of some statins and some things like that have these broad ranging anti-inflammatory characteristics. So some of these cocktails that have been developed around COVID have these broad-reaching anti-inflammatory effects, and they're able to kind of tamp down the inflammatory response so that the immune system can continue to do what it needs to do, but it doesn't kill you in the process.
Yeah. So is that, I guess, that answers my question, because the cytokine storm is what I was afraid was possibly happening every time I was getting a cold, because I get them once every, 3 years. Yeah. And when it happens, it's like, what the hell is this? They all build up and they just got me at one time.
Right.
But, when we talk about inflammation, I've had Gary Reinl on the show a few times. I don't know if you're familiar with Gary and the icing. And it seems common sense what he talks about moving. And I always say that with a cold that, you need the rest, but you also need to move your body to
Mhm.
try to move the inflammation out of your body. And so whether it be working your lungs or working wherever the cold exists in your head, whatever, and I'm not saying like shake your head, I'm saying move around so that your blood is moving and pumping through your body that can actually work this thing out. And it just seems to be common sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you want to rest and then wake up and move and then rest again, not this like lie in bed constantly. I just feel like things coagulate and get stuck and it's not moving and you're allowed. And I just think that's common sense. And that is the same with all inflammation. Like if we go, oh, we need rest, we need movement, and then we need a proper diet. But to bring in something that you might be familiar with we've got a guy on the show often, I call him Crazy Bobby, and he's a friend of mine, and he's always 10 years ahead of everyone else. He's onto these things, but he sounds like he's so full of shit.
Right.
And then, he eats buffalo testicles all the time or colostrum, he's always, chugging bee pollen, whatever it is. And he's 58, 59 years old and he looks like he's 20. And so he's doing something right or has incredible genetics. But two things he's working on. One, he's all about walking barefoot. And he totally, is sold on the fact that, your body, the lightning and the ground and the inflammation in your body. Have you heard anything about this?
Yeah, like the grounding stuff. And I have to admit, I was super skeptical of this.
Me too.
Yeah, and for a long time there wasn't good info on this. And it's kind of funny. I remember I have a screenshot from like around 2003 or 2004 in PubMed where I put intestinal permeability into PubMed, and there were very few returns, and most of it was like quackery, pseudoscience. Now, when you put intestinal into PubMed, permeability is like the first or second response. And it's one of the hottest areas of immunological research. We understand the gut microbiome is really important. I don't think we understand much beyond that. So there is a lot of pseudoscience around it. Like people are like, take this proprietary probiotic and you're good. And it's like, well, it just doesn't work that way, not for everybody. So it was probably bad of me to dismiss the grounding, but when you start hearing like energy and energetics, like my whole chakra balancing, like immune response goes off. But then I saw some papers like in the Journal of Physics where it was talking about, negative ion transfer and like the benefit of walking in grass and like going ankle deep in ocean water and all this stuff. And it seemed pretty credible. And I think that there's just been more information that's come as a consequence of that. I'm still kind of skeptical about these grounding mats. It's like you plug it in the wall and it's supposed to do the same thing as being outside. I'm decent at physics, but I'm not good enough at it to really sit down and look at that and be like, I guess, this makes sense. But it seems to have some chops to it. And if anything, like the paucity of material that I had like 20 years ago, there's more material that supports it now. So I view it a little bit like the gut, intestinal permeability, leaky gut and all that stuff. Like it was very fringe. Nobody was looking at it. And then as more people put some eyeballs on it, then we start discovering, oh yeah, there really is something that's, I don't know that it's like the first whistle stop to make on a health journey. It's like, start eating some real food, make sure your protein is adequate, sleep in a pretty reasonable period. And then that's kind of like icing on the cake stuff. But I could be wrong with that. I don't know. Maybe you eat better and you sleep better because you're doing all the grounding and all that stuff. It's good.
We should find out from Ronnie Teasdale because he buried himself up to his neck.
There you go. You go.
I swear to God, he said he was going to do it. The next thing I know, I see an Instagram posting of Ronnie neck deep. When you were talking about sleep and diet and this, not like where this would be on the whistle stop, where do you rank them? Where do you rank diet, exercise, sleep? I've heard different people say different things. I'd love to hear what you think.
It'd be really interesting if I could go back in time and then have a couple of parallel universes to run A/B experiments. And I would love to do my career over being the sleep guy, not the food guy, like not the paleo guy. I think that it would be harder initially in some ways to get things going because people really get, there's all this aesthetics and body composition stuff. Like if you have any type of dietary thing and you can show some efficacy, then you get a lot of buy-in. But I think you could still couch all that around sleep. But it would be interesting because if you aren't sleeping well, it's very hard to comply with dietary change.
Mm-hmm.
Like people are just overwhelmed with decision making. Like their decision fatigue gets hit by like noon. Like people make all these fucking decisions, or kids and family and work and all this stuff. You just hit this point where you're like, I'm done. And so the questionable piece of food goes across, in front of you, and you're like, well, yeah, I'm just going to eat it because I've given all the fucks I can give today, and I'm done. And sleeping better helps that a lot. Like it can double or triple the resolve that people have to make better decisions. And everything that we like about diet and exercise, kind of in a way, what it ends up doing is fostering better sleep at the end of the day. Adequate protein, not having really disordered blood glucose levels, doing enough exercise, but not too much exercise, getting outside, getting, light on our skin, and all that stuff. Ultimately, what the main litmus test we have is that you have better sleep. So I'm curious if it would have worked better to start from the perspective of sleep and then back into all this other stuff. It's like, well, your HRV score is bad. It looks like you're waking up in the middle of the night. We put a glucometer on you. Oh, you're getting this hypoglycemia. Why don't we try a lower carb diet? And then we're doing it in response to what your body is doing, not me just saying, hey, I'm going to take away your donuts and cookies and all that stuff, and we're going to call it paleo. And there's this like religious, shit fight right out of the beginning. So I really think sleep is where the rubber hits the road. And this is an interesting aside. And Kirk Parsley, I steal a bunch of this material from him. He's a retired Navy SEAL and a physician, and he ran the West Coast SEAL team medical concerns for like 8 years. But he made the case that, like, with the Guinness Book of World Records, you can jump a rocket motorcycle over the Grand Canyon, you can juggle flaming chainsaws, but they will not entertain extended sleep deprivation challenges anymore. Because the last 3 people that have stayed awake for like 9 to 11 days, they died. Like wow. They pulled the plug on it, they went to bed, and they never woke up, and they have no idea what they died from, but they died. And so the things that will kill us, kind of like in an order: inadequate oxygen, inadequate water, and then inadequate sleep, like way ahead of food. Virtually anybody could live for 2 weeks plus without food. It may suck, and there are very lean people that would have a rough time, but arguably that sleep deprivation is going to kill you before starvation would. And then if we just string together like suboptimal sleep, not even like the complete lack of sleep, aging is dramatically accelerated, inflammation is accelerated, disordered glucose, like everything that we associate with like metabolic syndrome and with shitty aging is accentuated by poor sleep and is mitigated by good sleep. So I really do put sleep at the central piece. But that said, if your diet is super disordered and like your activity level is either too high or too low, or just kind of squirrely timing, that can really feed back negatively into the sleep. But I think that they're germane to the degree that they influence sleep, and they're not separate entities. Like I really see that as being like the central hub of everything.
I want to get into the exercise, the too much exercise. And I think CrossFitters are so guilty of this. I had to find a balance myself. I'm on the spectrum right now of not enough exercise, but that's because I've got kids. But I do worry, like you said, about the aging, the stress, the everything of what is. It used to be I couldn't miss a workout no matter what,
right.
No matter what was happening during the day. What I did, if I went surfing and mountain biking, I still had to get my workout in. And I think, talk about putting yourself in an immunocompromised position. I think I contacted you the time I did Murph on a fast and ended up, I got Bell's palsy from it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they don't say that's why I got Bell's palsy, but I'm pretty sure you know, the virus lives within me. And the virus was like, oh, he's pretty beat up right now.
He's almost dead.
Yeah,
Fucking let's get it before he dies, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
and you know, it's one of those things like you'll hear guys go, I never quit a workout. Well, now I've quit workouts. Like in the middle of a workout, I'll go, you know what? I'm doing more
good.
damage than good. And it's time to just pull back.
Yeah.
I did it yesterday. I was on a run and I was up in the mountains and it was 90 some degrees. And my dog looked at me like, hey, we shouldn't be out here. And I was like, you're right. Let's start walking. Let's take a break. You know, there's no reason to have a heat stroke in the middle.
There's this thing called downhill, not uphill.
Yeah. And just that, but I think there, you know, I've talked about it in the CrossFit world that, that I tried to have somebody come on and talk about the body dysmorphia and the exercise addiction. And I had one time I had Dr. Drew on because I've had him on a bunch of times. And he was like, yeah, I think I have it. He's like, I love to exercise all the time. And I was like, okay, you're no help. But I wanted like an addiction expert to say, because I see it so much in CrossFit. I see these people that are working out 2 and 3 times a day. And, you know, if they're professionals, we put them on a pedestal. You know, we look at the Matt Frasers and the Rich Fronings and we're like, hey, they're amazing. But Rich even said it to me himself. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure if I didn't do this, I'd be addicted to something and it could be something bad.
Right.
You know, that I have addiction issues. So how come a guy like Rich Froning can exercise 3 times a day? And I know there's adaptation and he's built up to it. But I mean, are these guys doing damage to themselves with the stress they're doing on their bodies over and over and over again?
I mean, James Fitzgerald, who won like the first official CrossFit Games.
I've had him on the show.
Yeah, he's pretty open in describing that volume and intensity of work is without a doubt like antagonistic to health and longevity, you know, but people can make a lot of money doing it now. You know, playing in the NFL is almost certainly antagonistic to health and longevity, but if you can get a 10-year, 7 or 8 figure contract, then your meal ticket may be punched and you do the best you can on the back end of that. So I think that you have to, I'm hesitant to like, paint that as a bad thing because it's a professional sport now. And so, people can make decisions about being in it and all that type of stuff. Just as a quick aside, the thing that attracted me to CrossFit originally was that, like Glassman was a real student of economics and he was a real fan of like minimum investment, maximum reward. And for a long time, the cockswagger was, we barely do any training here. And then that allows us to do all this other cool shit there because we've got all this extra time and, we have mobility and high anaerobic capacity and some aerobic capacity and everything. And then the games, interestingly, as good as it was for CrossFit as a phenomena, it was absolute poison for CrossFit, the philosophy, because something shifted. It wasn't what's the minimum I can do in the gym to give me the maximum for the rest of my life. It was what can I do in the gym that doesn't kill me? And it became this brinkmanship thing where it's like bigger, longer, more intense workouts and everything. So I mean, that's that, and I think that that's a really problematic thing. And it's honestly something that CrossFit as a philosophy is going to have to come to terms with. It was 2009 that I when I was still on speaking terms with Greg, that I said, we should really split this into a legit health track and a legit performance track. And the two can have somewhat antagonistic elements, like the Venn diagrams may not perfectly overlap. And eventually, ironically, he ended up, I think, coming around to that. Like even he became really cranky and prickly about the games itself and really
I think it was a little too late.
It was super late. It was super late.
I saw him give a speech the night before the Woolsey fire started in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
I was at Pepperdine where he was, where the fires came to. And it was just really weird. It was this windy night. I went in and saw him speak and he kind of trashed the games.
Yeah.
And he said, those guys, whatever they do, they'll have to do whatever they have to do, alluding to almost that, there's performance enhancing drugs being used,
right?
And saying they're in a different world. They're the tip of the spear. They're the 0.00001%. None of you will ever be that. That is not what we do here. And when I saw him say that, I was like, well, you championed this forever. and you let it get you on ESPN and let you get all this credibility and marketing and notoriety, but now you're trashing it. And I was kind of on both sides of it going, if you're going to, don't speak out both sides of your mouth. It's one or the other.
Right.
And like you're saying, there should have been a choice in the beginning. Like, people run, and a lot of people run in a healthy way, and ultra marathoners, maybe not so healthy.
Right.
And, but hey, it's pretty cool what they do. And it's awesome to see the, human achievement and what they can do, but they're not the same things.
Right.
And, and I think it did get, and maybe it's getting pulled back in that direction. I just think when there was pressure in the CrossFit gyms to everybody has to do the open, everyone, like, you're all in this, you're all competing. And it was like, are we just giving CrossFit $20? Because we're not really competing. Right. And I know this is a community activity and you can judge yourself and everything, but then people got into this competitive mindset of, I'm going to win the CrossFit games. And it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not.
And a lot of gyms ended up failing as a consequence, because it was like taking a piece of wood and putting it in a chipper to their clientele. Like, all that came out the back end was pieces. There were not intact people anymore. And as geeked out as people are initially with doing that, you just reach a point where you're like, the butterflies in your stomach, like, about driving to the gym, like, oh my God, what's going to be there today? I do old guy Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, and it's very hard any day that we do it, but we drop in wrestling and takedowns, but it's in a really punctuated fashion. Mm-hmm. And our coach Travis is just like, we should do more of this, but if I do more of this, then people will quit coming to class. Because as challenging as jiu-jitsu is, the struggle of takedowns is so much harder. It's so much more dangerous because of the potential for impact, upon landing and all that type of stuff, that people just quit. So jiu-jitsu is hard on any day, but when you stick real legit takedowns day in, day out with that, and you're really being competitive with it versus kind of collaborative, then people check out. They're just like, I'm almost 50 years old, and it's just like, I don't know if the risk reward story is all that great. So I work takedowns, but I work them in a really controlled fashion and not super competitive. And so I think that's kind of a window into that stuff. And, we owned a gym up until 2010, but we only had like a couple of years where the games were a thing while we were running a brick and mortar facility, but it was absolute poison for our general pop. And we recognized that really early. It was cool in a lot of ways, but it was, a lot of people got cooked, and we did all kinds of stuff to try to mitigate that. And it's tough. It's kind of like having, teaching people jujitsu or boxing or whatever, and expecting everybody to go to Golden Gloves or something, and having that level of intensity. And they're like, fuck it, I'm going to go play golf again.
Yeah, I tapped out early on the games. I was like, this is going to get me hurt. And I don't want any involvement in this. And people used to get mad at me. Well, why aren't you doing it? Why don't you participate? And I was like, I had a saying one time, I stopped snatching a long time. I still do a little bit, but very light. And I just don't have the range of motion to do it properly. So I'm not going to try to go heavy. And I walked into his gym one day when I was on the road. He's like, hey, how's your snatch? And I go, I don't do them. He goes, why not? I go, it never got me laid, and it never made me money. So, like, it's not worth it in my life.
Right.
There's other things that are going to help me be functional and stuff like that. So I'm just it's like Glassman, trying to be efficient with what's going to work best for my lifestyle. And that just wasn't going to do it.
You asked a good question, about like, why can folks like Rich do this? John Welborn is a really sharp guy on this training. And he's a real student of like the old Eastern Bloc, training methods, and he'll read like the biographies of the people who developed all that stuff. And there was this thing that they would call like a big monkey versus a small monkey, and it was basically like your recovery capacity. And there were the Russian and Eastern Bloc Olympic lifting coaches, they would find these guys that thrived on high volume, high intensity, and they thrived. And they had teammates that were very, very good too, but the teammates had to lie about the work that they were doing because they would just explode upon the application of that amount of volume and intensity. Like they would gold and silver medal just like these other people would, but the researchers kind of got bamboozled by their own work and thought that, just more volume, more intensity worked. And it doesn't work for everybody. And you can even have somebody that's very elite, but they may need half the dose of somebody else, doing this stuff. And it's infrequent, but there are some people that just have literally no physiological adaptation to exercise. They just get sore. And but they don't get fitter. Like they're never going to run a mile faster. Their bench press is never going to go up.
Here I am.
Yeah, and so again, there's this crazy spectrum of genetic potential hidden in there, and focusing on what the elite are doing, it's kind of informative only the way that like looking at a sideshow is informative. It's like, okay, this is some of the weirdest shit that I've ever seen, but it like as far as it like informing what you should do on a day-to-day basis, like this is where I eventually made a rule in our gym, and I ceased to train anyone that was a cyclist. Like if they identified as a cyclist, because this was still when Lance Armstrong was in good stead and like everybody loved him, and they would look at all of his training volume and everything and the food that he ate, and they would push back on like the guy's got a big old gut and his lipids are all disordered and everything. And I'm like, dude, we got to get a handle on that. He's like, well, Lance does this. I'm like, yeah, you're not Lance. You don't have his bank account. You're not as good looking. Like you have nothing. And being Homo sapien, you got nothing there.
Not to criticize Lance, but look at Lance now. I mean,
he's pretty high mileage, man.
He looks like he's taken a beating, and he has, the amount of miles he's put on him. I wouldn't say he's the picture of health right now.
Right.
He has, and I think that's, I'm not going to go to the PEDs. I'm going to go to the stress he's put on his body. It's just an inevitability.
Right.
It's like there is this comfortable amount of finding that happy medium of where not too little or not too much, but he's definitely a too much. You're riding 100 miles a day up mountains. It's insane. It's just,
and he in a lot of ways changed the world. Like his name is now indelible in this space, and he did amazing. And when you talk to folks that have retired out of like the SEAL teams and stuff like that, I think that really takes a toll on them. And when you talk to them, like the camaraderie, the challenge, the rest of their life is kind of like a gray background home. Like the colors are never as colorful, the tastes are never as tasty. It's just kind of like, I'm still alive. I'm not so depressed I'm gonna like, start my gun or anything like that. But it's a totally different experience versus being at that like absolute like apex of what they're doing. And I've never been that person with anything, so I've never really understood that drive to be there. But I get it from the outside, and I can kind of empathize with where they must be coming from with that. You get someone that, and it is funny within CrossFit, a lot of people who were successful and are successful, not infrequently, they had some sort of addictive background, whether it was drugs or relationships or food or what have you. And arguably this is a much more healthy spot to channel that stuff, but it can still be detrimental over the long haul.
I hate to reference Rogan again, but he had a woman on recently that talked about addiction. And I never really understood the neural pathways or the way it worked. And, I knew it had something to do with dopamine and serotonin and all that, but I didn't. And she gives a really good explanation of homeostasis and how we try to keep this balance. And if we, go for that dopamine drip that we get from doing the things that we enjoy, from it could be gambling or drugs, it could be exercise, it could be, playing with your kids, whatever it is that's going to give you that dopamine drip, that after we do it, there has to be this kind of letdown from it. So if we do too much of it, the letdown is going to be crazy. And the people that use drugs consistently or have an addictive personality and just consistently use, if they're not doing that, that there's kind of a depression. So they are constantly chasing that dragon. They use the phrase. And I think, you know, that happens with people exercising, and it's almost like this, I got to keep chasing it. I got to keep chasing it. And that's, like I said, you know, we know that's not a totally healthy thing, but I didn't understand until I heard that episode, what was really going on with the dopamine. And it's a little scary because it's like, wow, you know, trying to keep this balance of what we're doing.
And I think that folks, you know, like the funny thing, and I think doing something like a CrossFit workout is much more fun and interesting than like 3 sets of 10 back squat. 3 sets of 10, you know, but whatever you do, if we moderate the volume and the intensity, and there's actually a little bit of consistency so that the dose looks kind of similar across time, then I think that there's a way to, so exercise is interesting in that you do the activity, then you get the dopamine response. And I think that it is better than, say, like junk food, where you mainly get the dopamine in anticipation and first consumption. And then when it's in you, you actually feel like shit afterwards. And there's kind of a crash with that. But I think that it's kind of funny, you know, just old school, like do a little cardio, lift some weights. Like there's kind of a sweet spot there where, oh, I feel better now. Like I was kind of dragging, I was low energy. I did some workout and now I'm better, you know, but you didn't try to do the white buffalo in the sky thing. So you don't have that huge crater after that whole thing.
Is it Huberman? Is that his name? The guy that does the podcast? I heard him talking about sugar and focus and ADHD. And he was saying that a lot of times, and I'm obviously an ADHD person, grew up like that. And I always thought, because I was a comedian, it lended itself to what I do. And it was an attribute. So I never wanted to get a hold of it, because I was like, this is what makes me be the guy I am. And I don't want to deviate from that. But listening to him, I was like, oh God, that's me. Oh, that's why I had difficulty in school. Oh, and it explained a lot. One of the things I heard him mention was people with ADHD self-medicating, you know, that cocaine and stimulants like caffeine basically do the same thing that Adderall do, that they give you this intense focus that, that you can't have as an ADHD person, but the stimulant can do it. And he was saying that sugar, I have, as much as I try to keep a really good diet, and I do at times, once I break free of it and hit the sugar, I'm an addict, and it's ugly. It's really ugly. And I wondered if that was, you know, my thing, that it wasn't so much the dopamine release, but I was self-medicating the ADHD.
Well, and I wouldn't see those as being mutually exclusive too.
Okay.
You know, could be both. You feel better and you get the focus, and because you get the focus, you get some task completion. When we do task completion, we get some dopamine. So I see that going a lot of ways. I mean, I've been doing nicotine mints since 2009 when I did work for Naval Special Warfare and really dug into this. I'm like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. You just don't want the tobacco. And I focus, how I feel, it's like night and day better with it.
I had another microbiologist telling me about those, and he is a long distance runner, trail runner, and he talks about them as like a performance enhancing drug. He's like, nobody talks about nicotine, but it's so taking nicotine, there's not, because it's not, you're not getting the tar or any of the bad things of the cigarettes. Nicotine's not it is addictive though, correct?
It's definitely addictive. But if and when you decide to go off of it, it's going to suck for a couple of days. But when I did the talk for Naval Special Warfare, they wanted me to get in and talk about like tobacco use and all this stuff. And so just doing diligence, I really got in and started doing some of the toxicology around tobacco in general, but I wanted to know about nicotine as a molecule. When I really looked at it, I'm like, this stuff isn't toxic. It's not a carcinogen. It's actually neuroprotective. like there's this crazy kind of artifact out in medicine that people who smoke have lower rates of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and like markedly lower, even though smoking causes lots of oxidative damage. And it's been this thing that like medicine hasn't known what to do with, or like, okay, there's actually some sort of benefit here. It appeared, and I just read a paper on this, that smokers fared remarkably well during COVID because nicotine seemed to have some sort of, you know, effect on like the ACE receptors throughout the lungs and throughout the body. But it does interesting things with acetylcholine, with dopamine. It is a stimulant, but it stimulates in kind of it's not as adrenal as say like caffeine would be. So we started figuring out this stuff for the SEAL teams, where like if they just needed to be awake and alert but not physically moving, then use a really minimal dose of nicotine. If you were moving and physically active, then we would use a little bit of caffeine. And like we figured out these kind of strategies for using that stuff. And
so what's the
yeah.
downfall of it? I'm sorry to interrupt, but what is the downfall of it?
I really don't know. I mean, you do become habituated to it. I was having this conversation with a really smart, very good friend of mine. She was like, well, I just don't know about that because I don't want to be addicted to anything. And I'm like, well, it improves my life. Like I enjoy my life better. I'm more effective. I can't figure out any health downsides. And man, I've looked and looked. And she was like, I said, the best I can liken this is I'm addicted to human contact. Like I need to hug and hold my wife. I need to hold and play with my kids. Like it would be soul crushing to lose that. So I'm addicted to that. But those things benefit my life. And, you know, So and again, I've been tinkering with this stuff for over 10 years, and I just can't really see what the downside is, other than you definitely habituate to it, you know, and you know, that can be a thing. But there was a 4 or 5 page WebMD piece that was bemoaning the fact that people were stopping smoking, but getting addicted to gum. And they were going on and on and on about this. And it was, I need to pull the thing up and read it again, but it was interesting. It was almost like the doctor started off with this case that like nicotine was bad. And then as he or she worked through this, by the time they got to about the last 3 paragraphs, they're basically like, but at the end of the day, the stuff isn't a carcinogen. It doesn't seem to have any individual health consequences. So really, maybe it's not that big of a deal, you know? And it was 4.5 pages of really like, oh man, we're really shitting the bed here. Like people are going from cigarettes to gum. And then it was like, well, actually, there's absolutely nothing that suggests that the gum or the mint should be remotely regarded in the same context as the.
So let's just say right here, we can safely say that if you can move from the cigarettes to the gum and the mints, we're pretty sure you're really, really moving in a great direction.
That is a massive beneficial move, like a massive beneficial move. Cardiovascular risk is decreased, like your rate of aging is going to decrease because you're not experiencing all that oxidative stress. Like if you're just vain and you don't want your skin to look shitty sooner, then like shift from smoking to chewing gum or mints. Yeah.
Speaking of skin getting shitty, I've been taking collagen. My buddy Maddie Aporta, that was working for a while at Vitals Collagen, got me on Vitals, and I take about 2 or 3, maybe 4 scoops a day of collagen protein. I was wondering, is the collagen protein, can I add that into my protein intake? Is that considered like, is it muscle building? Is it, you know, is it repairing my muscles? Is it doing that at all? Or is it just in connective tissue and kind of stuff like that in the skin?
I wouldn't count it. So for like really an anabolic response, you want lysine rich protein sources. These branched chain amino acids are what stimulate mTOR, which people get kind of weirded out about, but you have to have that for muscle protein synthesis and for recovery, and we want it turned on and then it turns off. You just don't want it turned on chronically, which is what happens in chronic overeating. But then there is this reality that there is in these, let's say, more like muscle protein versus connective tissue proteins, they tend to be much more rich in sulfur containing amino acids like methionine, and we should have that balanced with another amino acid called cysteine. And this is where like having Chris Masterjohn on sometime, like he's way smarter on this stuff than I am. But again, it kind of gets back to a pro versus anti-inflammatory process. And there does seem to be benefit with just balancing that sulfur and cysteine intake. And that is facilitated by taking in like bone broth or collagen and whatnot. Where collagen, and again, I was really skeptical about this, but collagen supplementation with a little bit of vitamin C, a little bit of loading, you know, like if you've rolled your ankle and your ankle is tweaked, taking consistent collagen, like 10 milligrams of vitamin C, it doesn't need to be much, and then loading it, you know, walking on it regularly, walking on the edge of your foot, you know, walking on it in a non-optimal, but the way that we roll our ankles, and you're starting, that really accentuates the repair of connective tissue. Like it really does. And I was super skeptical about that stuff. I'm like, just eat, you know, meat and fish and all that and call it good. But there's some good research out there now that suggests that getting that collagen in the background is beneficial. If somebody is really concerned about body composition, then they need to count that as calories. But if you are performance oriented, I would definitely not count it as protein. Like you still want the bulk of your main protein to come from sources that are high in lysine, so that we get that kind of growth stimulating effect.
Okay, that answers my question. I don't. This relates to protein or to amino acids, but I'm bringing in your product, your LMNT. I started using it because my wife was recommended it by her nutritionist, Dylan Farr, who's a really smart guy, does Physiologic. If you've ever seen him on Instagram, he's like Rain Man. He loves the research, everything. He nerds out on all of this stuff. And he was just like, there's this amazing product, blah, 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 Rob, you got to take this. And I was like, you know, I love Rob, blah, blah, blah. So my wife was taking it, and I did a long endurance race one time just as an idiot, and was trying to find a product that could get me through. And I tried everything, and I was doing salt pills. I was trying, every time I'd take a salt pill, I'd throw up, and it was the worst vomity feeling. Like I'd take it, and about another 2 or 3 minutes into the run, I'd be like, oh my God, what's happening? And I'd just be like, holy shit, that's the worst I've ever felt in my life.
Interesting, huh?
And so just constantly trying new things to fuel me through a race. And I ended up with a product called Tailwind, which was a lot of glycogen and salt. And it got me through the race. It was great. You know, it was in 19 hours, you know, so I had to constantly just keep up my electrolytes.
Right.
But then once I stopped, you know, doing endurance kind of performance, I was like, well, I need an electrolyte. You know, I need electrolytes. So when I work out, I mean, as I get older, I can't believe how poorly I feel if I don't have my electrolytes right. I mean, I still don't feel like I get enough magnesium, and I feel like I'm getting Parkinson's or something, that like my nerves just feel like they're twitching, and I'll get benign fasciculations. I've gone to see a neurologist because of the benign fasciculations. And they're like, you're fine. You know, they tested me for ALS and everything. They're like, you're fine. I'm like, what? Do you see that? See that? My arm moving right now? It's twitching, you know? And they're like, yeah. So I feel like those electrolytes calm all that shit down. And they, when I'm so deprived, when I'm tired, I'm exhausted. So I forget which company I was taking first. And then my wife was taking LMNT, and I was like, give me that. And she's like, no, it's too expensive. I'm not giving it to you. Like it's mine, and you can't.
It's her and the baby, basically. That's it. Yeah.
And my kids do love it. My kids love it. And so Dylan kept saying to me, yeah, you should really get into this. So one of the products I was taking had BCAAs in it. And an endurance athlete had told me, oh yeah, you need your BCAAs. This is a long story to get to my question. What I gather is I'm not doing endurance sports any longer. I don't need BCAAs. I'm not breaking down my muscles
Right.
My workouts last 20 minutes. I'm not out there for 4 hours or whatever it is. So for someone like me, I need your product. I don't need the BCAAs, correct? And why haven't you put that into your product?
Yeah, it's so easy to start down this road of, oh, we'll throw this thing in, we'll throw in some caffeine, we'll throw in some creatine, we'll do this and we'll do that. But at the end of the day, the real universal need that we're finding is electrolytes in general and sodium in particular, which is kind of crazy for people to wrap their head around, but the science is very defensible. And then the results when people use it performance wise, it just totally speaks for itself. So what we recommend, and like folks can use LMNT, clearly I love it when people buy that, but we have a free make your own homebrew. Like if people search for drink LMNT homebrew, they can figure out, this much sodium, this much potassium, this much magnesium, lemon juice, stevia, shake it up, go. And then we have all these, lists of really sodium rich foods, olives, sardines, salami, pickles. We just want to make sure that people tick the box of making sure they get adequate sodium, because if you're not okay there, it's on par with me at this point for like protein. It's like, if you aren't eating adequate protein, we're just peeing in the wind. Like we're not getting everything that we need for people to kind of function properly. And it's the same deal with electrolytes, specifically sodium. Like every thought we have, every muscle contraction that occurs is driven by sodium potassium pumps. Like this is the engine of life, and if we are off on that to some degree, you will be really suboptimal in your performance. And then if we fix that, then people start feeling much, much better. So, we keep the focus pretty narrow just on get the electrolytes dealt with. And then if somebody is, I'll use my jiu-jitsu experience as an example. Like I will mix up two bottles of electrolytes. Like I've usually got one like this, and then another one that's screw cap. And I'll go to jiu-jitsu and I'll sip on one of them during drilling, which drilling can vary. Like it can be pretty intense some days, but it's usually just kind of more cardio pace. And I'll work my way through most of that by the end of drilling. And then we have open mat, which is an hour. And I'll kind of look around. And if it's a bunch of beat up has-beens like me, then I just sip on the other bottle intermittently during the 1 hour of open mat. If it's a bunch of like 20-year-old purple belts that had D1 wrestling backgrounds, then I go over and I grab some glucose tablets, and I'll do somewhere between 10 and 20 grams of glucose. And I'll chew those up and then swish it down. So even with that, like I'm hesitant to make any product that's got like BCAAs or glucose, because I don't know, like it's a total guess as to whether or not I'm going to get it right for people, versus we've written up a bunch of protocols for like, okay, if you're a 175-pound male and you're doing this, and like you should be dosing BCAAs and like a maltodextrin on this schedule in addition to your electrolytes. So then the person can really exactly customize it for their needs, versus this kind of like slappy one size fits all deal. Like the one size that fits all is the electrolytes. And then we have protocols for people to buy some inexpensive like BCAAs or glycogen, supplemental products. And then they mix that stuff together. And it would be impossible to properly address that. Like just throwing 10 grams of glucose in there. It's like, well, maybe that's good for somebody. Maybe
One
it's
size
not.
doesn't fit all, and it's too hard to say. Can't believe you didn't correct me for mispronouncing it.
I just wanted to see you continue to step in that one.
Thanks.
So
Real douchebag. That's great, Rob. Appreciate that. The watermelon one is amazing.
It is. The cocaine in it helps for sure.
There's something in it that's like, my wife was like, wait till you try this watermelon one. I mean, I'm getting to the point where I guess it's because I used to say that my Green Mile meal, like I'm off to, they're going to electrocute me. I get one meal. It would probably be a really good Philly cheesesteak from Jim's with some chicken wings from the Comedy Cellar in New York City. and then I'd wash it down with a Gatorade
Mm,
because I just loved Gatorade as a kid, and I just loved the taste of it. I would never drink it now, but because I know it's just sugar water, and it definitely has its place if you're
yeah.
that depleted or something, and like people always think, oh, I'm sick, I'll drink Gatorade. I'm like, oh, it's not really what you need. I mean, it's like you need Gatorade if you're, in a diabetic coma or something, like insulin, but the taste of LMNT is it's maybe it's this I've acquired it a little bit, but it's gotten there because I guess
Mhm.
you use stevia.
We use stevia. Yeah.
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 And stevia always is like too sweet for me,
Mhm.
but the stevia cuts the salt, and
Yeah.
it's just this like perfect combination that I mean, I feel like I'm kissing your ass, but you did a
Well,
good job.
And thank you. I mean, we really did work on the flavorings, and a lot of that can get dialed up or down based off of how concentrated it is. So, like Nikki drinks a stick pack in like 20 ounces of water, and I find it unconsumable at that
Yeah.
concentration. This thing's like 32 ounces, and I fill it like so that it's like bubbling over the top, and
That's what I do.
that's about what my tolerance is. And like if I can mix it in a bigger container, like we have something that's almost 80 ounces, and I'll put 2 stick packs in that, so it's even more dilute than this, that's where I'm like, oh, this tastes really, really good now. So even that flavor profile, usually folks will notice that there are some people, they're like 16 to 20 ounces, and literally I don't know how they make it. Like I just
Let me get
like,
to the
yeah.
science of it, because there's probably a lot of people out there that we've had Stan Efferding on talk about the sodium potassium pump. Dylan's talked about it 1,000 times, like 4 or 5 years ago. These guys were like, and like this is the thing, the sodium potassium pump, the magnesium, how important it is. Get your, nutrient dense diet, why you need these things. And Dylan's done a good job kind of coaching me through it, but I'm thinking for like the average person out there that's going, wait a minute, we've been told all along, it's like fat, it's bad for you. Sodium, it's bad for you. If you are not eating a clean diet of non-processed food, is this bad for you?
Yeah, because usually, so where folks in Western societies typically get sodium is from highly processed foods. And then you tend to, it's very easy to overeat these highly processed foods. So then when we overeat, we get insulin resistant, and we retain sodium, retain water, and we end up with high blood pressure. So this is kind of where the demonization of sodium occurs. And in that context, it's completely, on point. Like that's a combo deal of like processed foods and sodium and what have you. But when folks shift their diet towards anything that's clean, it could be paleo, it could be vegan, it could be, whatever, what they typically find is their sodium intake drops, their glycemic load drops, and then their need for sodium actually increases, because there's this phenomenon called the diuresis of fasting, when our insulin levels drop either from fasting or keto, and your relative insulin levels can drop just going from a very over caloried, highly processed diet to an adequate calorie, minimally processed diet. You're going to have a really favorable improvement in insulin levels. But part of that is with a potential downside, at least transiently, is your body's not going to hold on to sodium and water the way it used to, and you're going to feel lethargic, foggy headed. The folks will call it the keto flu. And I guess that's kind of one piece of this thing. And the other piece is that even in these hypertensive populations, these groups of people that have high blood pressure, there have been a lot of good, well-conducted studies where they put these folks on a very low or even no sodium diet, and it only brings their blood pressure down a little bit. Like it's a very minimal improvement. Whereas sticking these folks on a lower carb diet, it every single time it ends up improving blood pressure, and in a much better magnitude than what we see out of trying to control sodium intake. So it's if someone were to go to like Argentina and you saw a traditional diet, it's like meat and seafood and root vegetables and greens and fruit and everything. and they use a shitload of salt with everything they do.
Right.
You think about a traditional Japanese diet before it got more westernized, which is much more starchy and kind of rice-based. But the average intake of the recommendation for Americans is to consume less than 2,000 milligrams of sodium per day. And we're a hot mess. Japanese average consumption of sodium is somewhere between 10 and 11 grams a day. It's literally 5 times greater. And they do not have 5 times the cardiovascular disease we do. They have less, although it's getting worse as they industrialize their diet and they eat both more sugar and fat and, you know, all the rest of this stuff. So it's interesting, you know, if somebody is a peri-diabetic, hypertensive, high blood pressure, they don't need elements. Like, they are retaining all the sodium and water they need.
Right.
They do need to move their ass a little bit and they need to sleep better. And we need to find a way of getting a glycemic load that makes them reverse their kind of peri-diabetic state. And then ironically, when they're not borderline diabetic and hypertensive, then they're probably going to benefit from eating a little bit more sodium, you know, whether it's purely dietary source like olives or supplementing something like LMNT.
Yeah, the pickles and the olives have been a really good thing. And years ago, I remember somebody telling me, if you have a food craving, you know, if you need to be satiated, eat pickles or olives. And I was like, why?
Yep.
They're like, well, they have salt in them, and that's going to make, you know, curb your hunger cravings. So, because I don't want to monopolize your whole day, I have so many questions I wonder for you. How badly do you wish that you got to debate James Wilkes on the Rogan show?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. He's such a clown that it's just like, debates. What I would have enjoyed is we pick some topics to discuss, like whatever it is, and then he presents it, I present, and then we get to cross-examine each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe a group of people cross-examine us. And then we pick another topic. But like, just this rolling debate where you can do gotchas, like,
yeah, it was making me insane because I felt like they both were agreeing on so much.
Right.
It didn't, and I don't want to, I felt like Chris handled himself really well. And I wasn't like, go meat, even though I am a meat eater. I felt like he was being unfair to Chris. And I didn't feel like it, and no offense to Joe, but I don't think it was being moderated correctly. And just because someone admits they were wrong about something doesn't mean they've lost then. Like, it does, like, for Chris to say, oh, I made a mistake about that, doesn't mean he was wrong. I just felt like there wasn't enough accurate information, not on Chris's part, but he was being kind of bullied. And I listening to the show, I thought we don't have enough shows like this when it comes to everything in politics. I listen to a political show called Left, Right, and Center on, I think it's not on NPR. It's like an NPR. I forget what it is, but you can find the podcast anywhere. And they have an editor from the left, an editor from the right, and a centrist guy. And they're like top publication guys like The Nation or you know, wherever it be, the Post or whoever they write for. And they have debates where they don't argue. They don't yell at each other. It's not WWE. It's not talking points. It's not, hey, we've got 2 minutes till we go to commercial, fight. It's long form conversation where almost every time you come away going, I see both their sides. And we have to find some kind of consensus between the two. And then you see the ugly politics that are going on that are corrupting the whole thing. And so I feel like as a society, we've gotten almost smart enough with all this podcasting and having an attention span back at least a certain amount of the population that we could have these shows where there are good debates, where you, like you said, you know, the two of you come with your things that you're going to talk about. And then there's a group that ends up moderating. They used to do Crossfire. Remember that show? Something like that, to the extent where instead of being so tribal and us all fighting over, we find common ground. And I was listening to a podcast, you talking about regenerative, excuse me for not pronouncing that right, regenerative farming. And, you know, like, if you could the things you were talking about vegans, where if you could have this discussion with them, then it's like, show me the common sense in this. Show me,
Right.
because you're taking the emotion out of it. Then you're taking, do I think plant-based diets? Yeah, I think we should all be eating a lot more plants. Like, I think they're great. Do I want to kill animals? I hate killing animals. I catch spiders in my house and take them outside. I don't want to kill animals. Do I believe we're, an apex predator? Yes. Do I believe that we should eat meat? Yes. Do I believe that animals are being, my argument to vegans every day is like, do we tell bears to stop eating salmon? Are we going to stop the animals from killing the other animals? And then what's going to happen to the population control? So I would love to see a show like that. And I hope that like guys like you that are experts in your field could maybe do something like this. I think it would just benefit us all so much.
Well, I mean, that the Sacred Cow book and film was clearly it's one-sided. It's just our broadcast of that, but that was on like the regenerative ag, the role of meat in climate change and all that. Like that was our attempt at like, here's where we stand on this stuff, and people in the real like grass-fed meat elitist scene didn't like a lot of what we had in there, because we didn't completely beat up on conventional meat production. Like there are elements of it that definitely need to be improved, but there's actually a lot going on there that is quite good and should be celebrated. It's kind of like this whole notion of like, because America has a mixed past with like racial experience and stuff like that, that it just needs to be burned down and like there's something better waiting in the wings. It's like, no, this is as shitty as whatever it is, this is kind of the best we have. So do we keep iterating towards something better? Do we go to those places that we know are far, far worse, so we laid it out there. And the interesting thing about that is we've had literally zero commentary from like the James Wilks and people like that. And I think it's because we did such a good job. They didn't want anybody looking at it. Like we spent 5 years putting that thing together, and it's like, I think it's both readable and watchable as book and film. We didn't fuck up much in that. Like we were really, really careful, and there were multiple times where we could have bent things to make it, because when these vegan films come out, everything is good. Like this part, it'll keep you skinny and you'll live forever and it'll save the planet and you get adequate nutrition. There's no downside. Whereas like we had multiple things that would make, like meat eaters or, meat elitists cranky. And we got much more pushback from like the meat elitists than we have from the
I really think that's the way people need to start addressing everything they do. I said that about Fauci. If Fauci hadn't lied in the beginning, he said he lied for a reason. They didn't want the help. I think we're not children. We don't, you don't have to tell us about Santa Claus. If you tell us why, we'll trust you. And most of us will do the honorable thing. Yes, there are going to be people that still go out and buy every mask in the store, and they are going to cause some problems. But down the road, you're not going to cause these problems. If you show people both sides, we're going to trust you more. And that's what I always try to do to people. I go, I'll tell you what's wrong with me. I'll tell you because I'm like, you're going to catch me. So I might as well tell you up front, like when my wife was the first person I ever was like, here I am. This is the truth, because you're going to find out anyway who I am. So I might as well show you the real me right away. And if you like me, you like me. And if you don't, you don't. And I think, Chris Rock has a great joke about that. Did you ever see him do the joke about you're merely meeting a representative of that person? That's not your real hair. Those aren't your nails. You're just a representative. I think if you go and show both sides, then people have a trust in you and they go, okay, I'm going to trust what he has to say. Because when I see somebody selling me on veganism or keto or this being the end all be all, I'm like, no, this is a snake oil salesman. And I'm a little worried now. And I don't know if I'm going to put trust in this person, because they're not showing me the downside of it. So I haven't read Sacred Cow. I'm going to read that now. I'm very excited about it. Just because for interest of time, I wanted to get into a couple things about meat eating and disease. A buddy of mine has gout right now, the disease of kings.
Yeah.
He is, he likes to partake in life. He likes
Yeah.
fun. He eats well. He drinks well. And I've read some stuff in a few places that mention that it is, it could be sugar related, you know, that's not the purines, that it is inflammation and inflammatory. And everybody automatically goes, you're eating too much meat, you're eating too much fish, you're drinking too much wine. What is it in your opinion?
Beer is a biggie. So it definitely is the purines. Like it's a piece of it without a doubt. But being metabolically kind of broken, so that liver function is off from high hyperinsulinemia and all that, that definitely worsens it. And gout is a funny one where some people will say like go really low carb, and which usually means at least maintaining or increasing meat intake, which meat contains purines, yeast contains purines, which in really large amounts, which is why beer is really problematic for gout. Wine's pretty problematic. Like if you're going to have alcohol, you're better off having like a NorCal margarita type thing, like pure, you know, just pure spirits. Some people, when the insulin levels drop, they're great. The uric acid levels drop, so they're good. Some people, they really need to do some sort of like allopurinol, like the medication to mitigate gout, and they need to get through the other side. And they do well to decrease all these purine sources, red meat, beer, wine, some types of cheese that are more rich in it's basically anything with a lot of cells in it. So the yeast have tons of cells, the meat has cells, and the cells have
So you're saying
DNA.
so you're saying they need the medication because it's acute, like to take care of it at
Yes.
that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
But then to kind of switch the diet to something more
little paleo-ish, you know, Mediterranean paleo-ish, something like that will usually take care of it. And they'll figure out, oh man, okay, I can have some beer, but I can't have beer and this. And, you know, they usually figure out some middle ground there. But it's gout's a tricky one. Like it's elevating insulin levels can worsen it. Definitely elevating the purine intake can worsen it. And some of the ways of getting out of that, you know, like you eat low carb, but you're eating more meat, so you're getting more purines. For some people, again, they slide right through that just fine. And other people, they need some pharmaceutical support while they navigate that whole thing. And then it also begs the question, like, is this friend going to ever change anything about what he's up to? You know, it sounds unlikely. It sounds like he's just probably some Chris Farley-esque, like life of the party person. And it's just like,
exactly
it just is what it is.
That's exactly, and I'm going to play this for him. So, yeah, he's a fat fuck. No, I'm joking. He likes to have a good time. And he's not a Chris Farley by any means, but he likes good food. He likes good wine. And,
sure.
I was wondering about that. NAC. What about that?
Within the context of like
two things
the
within
gout.
the context of gout, because you're talking about the liver function, and also within like, it's been pushed on me a lot, and I'm taking it, and it's one of those things where I could tell you why I take everything I take. I really don't know why I take NAC.
So I really don't know how NAC would function there. It enhances the body's natural production of glutathione, which is our primary antioxidant. So it might help there. Oh, well, you know, they do administer NAC with like Tylenol poisoning and whatnot, because it helps to detoxify the acetaminophen. It helps mitigate the damage to the liver. So it might help there, but I'm guessing. Like I really don't know. NAC is fascinating, like really potent antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. It's been in use as a supplement for over 50 years. and the FDA just jumped on it with both feet because early in COVID, it was being used in some COVID protocols. And then there's also a pharmaceutical coming out that is geared towards some sort of neurodegenerative problem. And the main ingredient is NAC. And this thing's going to be a patented pharmaceutical.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And then,
yeah,
and then,
it's so fucked up. It's just like, God, man, you guys don't even try to hide it now. You know, it's like, geez.
So I've stocked up on it.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got my Thorn NAC. I've talked to you because I have someone close to me with cancer that I've gotten on a better diet, but when it comes to keto, and I know you went, you know, you're become the keto man, which I always found interesting how you went from paleo to keto. Could you tell me a little bit about why? And I still consider keto kind of paleo. So
yeah. And I mean, it's funny. Like if you look at the recommendations in my first book, it was actually quite low carb. It's just like keto wasn't as popular then. Mm-hmm. And so I just said, hit this protein level, keep your carbs below 50 grams per day for the first 30 days, and then we can tinker with more later. So I mean, I've always been on that more keto side of things. For some, keto is possibly beneficial for cancer in one of two ways. Some cancers directly benefit from a low glycemic environment, like the lack of glucose or the lower levels of glucose really kind of starve them back. Not all cancers do that, though. Some cancers are actually made more aggressive and kind of emboldened with a ketogenic diet. But then the flip side of this, and this is something that I think that the folks that, because there are lunatic people who are like, just go keto, brah, and that'll solve your cancer. It's like, no, fuck, man, it's possibly a tool, but this other part is really interesting. Keto and fasting, like the deep state of ketosis, it's a consequence of fasting and using ketogenic diet to help get you to launch into that. There have been some studies. Now, these are in mice. We haven't done it in humans because it'd be unethical to do it, but these mice were fasted and then exposed to a radiation dose that was in the unfasted mice was uniformly fatal within 3 days. All the mice died from that group. None of the fasted mice died.
Interesting.
And what's interesting about keto and fasting in the context of cancer therapeutics, it looks like chemotherapy is made less toxic generally. I wouldn't believe that that's a 100% across the board thing, but it seems like people are better able to deal with different chemotherapeutic products and not get as much of negative downsides. And radiation for sure seems to be better tolerated. So the normal tissues are made more resilient against chemo and radiation. The abnormal tissues, cancer, is generally made more prone to the damage by chemo and radiation. So this is some of the stuff that I think is really valuable. And like we've barely even looked at things like intravenous vitamin C plus HBOT, like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, where we are put in a super high oxygen environment and our body creates reactive oxygen species, which cause hell on cancer. Cancer doesn't deal with free radicals very well.
Rob, I want to stop you for 1 second. And because I was going to try to end the show, but I really want to talk to you about this for two reasons, but I'm down to 9% battery. I got to get my charger. Hold on.
Okay.
Hope it doesn't buzz. Sometimes the charger makes it buzz.
Huh.
I'm in my kitchen right now because I'm building a new studio.
Right on.
My wife got rid of my school bus studio, and now I got to build a whole new studio.
No more stabbing wagon.
No, it was the best thing. The Bingle bus. I took an old school bus, paid $10,000 for it, put about $80,000 into it to build this studio.
Wow.
And I think my wife sold it for like $5,000. She just wanted it out of the driveway. But back to the kid, like this show has been the least funny show I've ever done because you are like such a wealth of information. And
I have that effect on people. I'm like the wet blanket that, just wah, 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 Robb's here.
There's like, I'd love to do a show with you where we do a podcast almost like Dr. Drew and Adam used to do Loveline, where
Right.
we do a nutrition show where you just answer the serious questions and I just make fun of people's penises.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, because and they were so great together because Dr. Drew was just so matter of fact and had a great
Credible. Yeah.
And didn't make fun of people and didn't hurt people's feelings and didn't joke and was totally credible. And then Adam is just an asshole like me.
Right.
And it was amazing to listen to them talk about things that people needed to hear. And if you talk to Drew, he's one of the greatest guys. He started that by just volunteering, by going on the radio to give people information because he felt like there's so many people out there that needed this help. And he just did it out of pure benevolence. And then somehow they matched him and Adam together and it was like chocolate and peanut.
Magic. Yeah.
It really was. And so many people go, oh man, I learned about STDs or I learned this, or I was so worried about getting AIDS. And so they did a great thing, but I feel like the nutrition world could have something like that. But I'd end up just calling everybody a fat fuck. So it might not work out. But back to the cancer thing. When you talked about hyperbaric chamber, Crazy Bobby's newest thing that he's on right now is the hypobaric chamber.
Oh, interesting.
The hyperbaric, I think, puts oxygen in or puts pressure in.
Yeah.
Hyperbaric takes the oxygen out.
Well, and usually what it will do is just generally lower the partial pressure of all the gases. So it's like sleeping at altitude.
Sure. So what he has a thing called the stratosphere. He's got it down in Arizona. He's been working on it for 10 years now, and they've got a patent and they're trying to get it to market. But it's a machine that you get in that does that, and it changes the altitude or simulated altitude. And there's like 2,000 different pressure changes within, like, say you sit in it for a half hour, where you can go all the way as high as Everest Base Camp and then back down to ground level. But you go up, down, up, down, up, down, so that your body never acclimates. And so that your body's continuously making red blood cells. And, Bobby swears he's got the fountain of youth, and it does in theory sound like it's going to work. And because it's Bobby, I say it's not, but who knows, he just tells me.
The only thing I push back on stuff like that, and this is true of like fasting writ large, like people will talk about, autophagy and it'll turn over, damaged cells and everything. Yeah, that's true. But we only have so many stem cells. And once those are gone, you're done. And this is why people like in their 80s, 90s, just kind of like fall off a bridge. They're pretty good, but then they get like multiple organ system failure and they just kind of go to pot all at once. Is because you literally just kind of run out of stem cells and there's nothing else left to repair things. And these processes, like I'll guarantee you that as I age, the thing that I run out of stem cells first is going to be the skin in here. From like all the working out I've done, like I've aged that area of my body at a markedly accelerated rate compared to everything else. And all those stem cells can migrate around and they can culture them in a lab and different things. And there might be some ways of like circumventing that, but it's there's this thing called the Hayflick Limit, and basically eukaryotic cells, the cells that make up us and most complex organisms, they have about a 50 replication limit. And then once they've replicated 50 times, the telomeres get a little shorter each time. And when the telomeres are real short, the cell either dies or turns cancerous, not that great either way. And then that's it. And so some of these things that are like, we're really enhancing this cellular production or whatever, it's like, maybe that's cool. Like, I think sleeping at altitude is maybe not a bad idea. Like there's this whole philosophy around like live high, train low. I think that there's something to that, but like if you're legitimately like turning over red blood cells at a real high pace, you're going to run out of stem cells faster at some point because there's a limited number of them there given our physiology and current technology. And this is an interesting thing about just eating low carb. Red blood cells live about 3 times longer on low carb than they do high carb, which is kind of interesting. Like that's kind of an interesting thing. Like I would see that as being a hallmark of delayed aging, but I don't know if I drove that particular bus off of a cliff or not. But like I'm hesitant about some of these modalities that are really like, we're going to spin up your stem cells, or we're going to, rejuvenate all this tissue. It's like, okay, if you have degenerative disc disease or something like in your back or neck or whatever, it's like, I kind of get it, but just spinning that up to spin it up, I'm not so sure that that's a super well thought out plan. Or maybe you feel much better now, but there's going to be a little bit off the top and later potentially, which could be a viable, decision to make.
Very interesting. I can't wait to hit him with this. And I'm sure because he tells me we're going to live to be 1,000 years old, and he's always got the answer. Oh, you're this guy I'm talking to now. So I'll run this by Bobby and shove it in his face later today. Because I won't be able to keep it in my goldfish head for much longer. So interesting, you talked about the autophagy. Autophagy on the surface does seem like the answer to everything. And if you can explain what I know what it is, but explain to the listener, I'm sure most of them know if they've played with fasting.
Yeah, and we definitely need autophagy, and it is a process of cellular recycling. Apoptosis happens at like a cell level, where a cell will kind of self-regulate and recognize that it's becoming what's called senescent or abnormal, and it'll just die. And if that happens under ideal circumstances, then parts of the immune system kind of mop that mess up. There's a little inflammation, but hopefully not too much. And those proteins and some of the cellular components get recycled, and we get a remodeling, or it's part of we have a growth side of our physiology, but also a repair side of our physiology. And the repair is this autophagy and recycling of proteins primarily. The thing that gets lost in that story, though, is that the studies that really paint, say, like fasting super favorably are predominantly in animals which are chronically overfed. And when they feed these animals a species appropriate diet and then calorie restrict them, like you feed a mouse what a mouse should actually eat, and you calorie restrict them, the mice live less long, not longer. And so what it looks like is that when you're feeding a critter a super shitty processed diet, that eating less of it is better than eating more of it. And I think, all this hoopla, like you've probably heard about calorie restriction and fasting, I think almost everything in that whole space boils down to how good is it to not overeat, like for health and longevity. It's fucking amazing. Like, yeah. It is really amazing. You go to Sardinia, you go somewhere where people are not lifting weights or not modifying their diet, but they just eat well, they eat traditional foods, and they don't overeat. They age wonderfully. And so we're comparing an overfed population simply not overeating and saying that's fasting or that's calorie restriction, when it kind of is, but it's really, if we can just get people to a spot where they spontaneously control calorie intake, which I would say, from a public health perspective, this isn't really helping things for the knuckleheaded CrossFitters that are like, I need to enhance my autophagy. It's like, I don't know that you do. You're lean, you're active.
Yeah.
You're maybe you're good. And maybe once a quarter, you want to do a 3-day fast. Great. You want to do a little bit of time restricted eating. Fantastic. But I don't think that in that population, 5 and 10-day fasts, like 3-day fasts once a week, 22 hours, I don't think it's helping people.
Right.
And I think circling back to this Hayflick limit and stem cells, I think that it could actually be shaving both health and longevity out of the total equation.
Yeah, somebody posted on Instagram recently, so you know it's got to be true.
It's
Something
better than Facebook then.
something about how, yeah, God, yeah, that it's owned by the same demon. It's got to. They were saying that our sugar consumption has gone down over the last 10 years, yet obesity's gone up. And I was talking to Dylan about it, and he's like, "Look, you know, we're consuming more chicken. We are and I was like, well, that's protein. And he's like, yeah, but we're hypocaloric. We are eating more calories. And it's that simple that, like, we live in a society, and this didn't come from Dylan, this comes from me, that we live in a society, and I've noticed this mostly in America, where we have an obesity problem. We have a bit of a capitalism problem. That is, so many people make so much money from selling food, whether it be fast food, restaurants, whatever it is. We are food, food, food. When you're not hungry, you see an ad for food and you're like, well, now I'm hungry.
Right.
And you just want to eat. You didn't want to eat, but you want to eat now. And you saw,
Right.
you're driving down the highway and you see a billboard, where in a lot of countries you don't see billboards. Pull over at this stop. There's food to eat. There's food, there's food, there's food. And we live in this. And so I don't blame sugar. I don't blame, I do blame capitalism a bit, and that we just over market, over advertise, over, shove things in people's face to make more and more money with like zero, not integrity, but zero compassion. We're not looking at society as a whole. We're looking at our own checkbook going, I need to make more money. I don't give a shit what I'm selling. I got to sell more. It's not my fault. They should know how much they consume. And I've always said to my dad says that about McDonald's. He's like, well, McDonald's, they don't force you to eat it. And I go, no, but if I give a kid heroin, he's going to like it and want to have more heroin. So are we allowed to advertise for heroin? Well, we are, oxycodone, but are we allowed to advertise for that? So no. So why are we allowed to advertise for these things that are so detrimental to their health, like McDonald's food? Or, well, you're only supposed to eat a little bit of it. Well, yeah, you're only supposed to do a little bit of oxycodone too, but you're going to get an addiction to it. Sugar is more addictive than, cocaine. And so I do believe that and I'm, probably, I don't know if I'm left of center, if I'm libertarian, I don't know what I am. But at that point, I do feel like, why can we restrict people advertising illegal drugs? Or why are these things legal? Why can't we make them illegal? Why can't we? And I'm being, talking about a chimerical world or whatever it is, but.
No, I guess I don't know that labeling it capitalism per se is really the thing there. I mean, we got in and did a half decent job of like blocking the access that tobacco companies had to kids and all that type of stuff. There's still a crazy deal there where like the federal government subsidizes tobacco production and then taxes it. And this is something that makes me crazy. I'm like, why don't you just pull all the fucking subsidies out of this first, like as a starting point? And so like we super subsidize the production of junk food. It's an institutionalized thing, and there's a revolving door between the FDA and industry and all that stuff. And there's a lot of work that we could do there to tighten all that up. Like at a beginning, we shouldn't subsidize these row crop food items that mainly get converted into garbage, so like that's kind of a beginning. Maybe we tax it, maybe we don't. I think definitely, like I can't tell you how many boxes of cereal I got as a kid, mainly because they had the cool gizmo in there that I saw on cartoon. I ate the cereal. I liked the cereal, but I really wanted like the sea monkey deal or whatever. It was really genius with that. Like limiting advertising. Like I think the United States and New Zealand are the only countries that you can see direct to consumer marketing of pharmaceuticals on like television and radio and all that. That's something that should change. But I think from an epistemological thing, I don't know that I call that capitalism. Like, we need to really curate what these capitalist activities are able to do. You know, it's because of like human trafficking stuff, there's been this real big pushback about, you know, certain elements of like online sex stuff, like the OnlyFans and everything. I think that's a great conversation to have. Like, that's a good thing to start kicking some tires on and have some conversations. But I always get nervous where it's like, this is capitalism's thing. Like, I think that it could
okay. I'll give you that.
Stuff
I see where you're going, but I'm talking social conscience. I think we have, especially now, everybody tries to be such a virtue signaler, and they're doing it. But there's so many people out there that are doing that, yet they might own a chain of McDonald's, or they might, you know, and it's hard. I remember when I first started doing commercials, I was an actor in commercials, and they said, is there anything you won't do? And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do any products that hurt people. You know, like, if anything's out there that's like detrimental to somebody's health, I'll turn it down. The next thing you know, I'm in a Budweiser commercial, you know, because it's offering me $30,000 or something. You know, it was like, I want that money, and it's hard to say no to that money. And so that's why I say it's capital. Like, there is this, oh shit, you know, there's money to be made. Got to make your money where you make your money, because you don't know where the next, and maybe you'll take that money and do some good with the money. You know, you hear the Matt Damons of this world say, well, I'll do this shitty thing so that I can do this good thing. Or, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio, we're going to trash this beach, but I'm going to take the money from this and we're going to go save the environment. You know, and we all justify it in our own way, which I assume every person that owns a Popeye's chicken, hear that, Armin? My former co-host's family owns Popeye's chickens.
Nice.
And he's, you know, all paleo and blah, 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 and CrossFit coach. And we all justify it in different ways. And so that's why I go against my libertarian ways and go, we need to regulate shit, or else we'll all go crazy. You know, like, we're all going to go to the buffet and take a bucket.
Yeah. I mean, the deck has not been stacked favorably in our favor, for sure. And I think at a minimum, revisiting these foods shouldn't be subsidized by the government. Maybe there should be some taxes. Maybe there should be some curtailment in how they're advertised. The kind of fucked up thing with that is there's some of that happening already. And, you know, we see what happened with tobacco. What did tobacco do when they got kicked out of the United States, basically? They went to the developing world and they made it sexy for, you know, poor people who are gaining wealth. Well, what's a sign of status? You get to smoke. What's a sign of status in developing countries now? That you get to eat processed food. And this is something that the like social justice people kind of make me a little crazy about, where it's a status symbol for somebody out of Latin America to have a little bit of a belly and to feed their kids processed food, because it's like, I don't work in the fields. I'm better than that. You know, I've done better than that for my family. So then how do you decouple that from like our current food system? Like, it's pretty depressing.
Have you ever heard the idea that I saw this in Lawrence Lessig's book, Republic Lost, that the corn subsidies and the food subsidies are what cause our immigration problems, a lot of it?
No, I haven't read that. No.
It's very interesting. He's saying basically they lobby the government to get these subsidies that we now can make our food so cheap that it is cheaper to buy American food than it is to buy Mexican food. It's actually cheaper to buy American food in Mexico than it is to buy Mexican food grown in Mexico.
Oh, fascinating.
So what happened was, farming was the number one occupation in Mexico. It put all these farmers out of business. And the whole idea of subsidies initially was to
wipe out that competition.
And initially it was to help the small farmers. Like, if you and your crop went cold that year and you couldn't grow your beans, you were done. But now that there's corporate farming and they've, you know, that's like a collective, and they go, oh wow, this this bean farm went out. So what? We have 16 other bean farms.
Right.
Big deal. They don't need the subsidies any longer, but they're still taking this up. Why wouldn't you take free money from the government?
Right.
So they lobby to get the free money. They get the free money. They cheapen the prices of the food, put everybody in Mexico out of business. And then there's now work in America because there's farms, these giant corporate farms, and there's no work in Mexico. So they're coming over the border to get the jobs. So I always feel like whenever we talk about an issue, they're so complex and there's so much more to it than just what you see on Fox or CNN.
Yeah.
And there's so much nuance to it all. And so like the immigration thing, it's like, well, let's go to, there's so many more issues to it. It's not just, oh, we need to build a wall. How about we stop subsidizing
food? Ironically, this is one of those like Malcolm Gladwell things where like you're focusing on the wall, but like the cause is actually farm subsidies way off over here in this other spot. Huh? Yeah.
I don't know. I could go on forever. I stole so much of your time. I'm
going to scoot so I can pee before my next next shindig. So
Sacred Cow, the book's available on Amazon, correct?
It is available everywhere. It's also a film available on all the like digital platforms and whatnot. So if you don't like reading, or you know someone that's curious about like all this climate change stuff around meat and its role in climate change, like it's a very accessible film, and I would love for people to check that out.
I'm going to do that because you can have people sit down and watch a film. You can't have people read a book. So I'm going to show the film to my wife this week. Also, Element, or as I call it, LMNT, and I'm going to call it LMNT for the rest of my life, is incredible. And if you're keto or you're exercising or whatever, I swear by it. I think it's amazing. And you do not pay us to say that. We
might in the future, but we don't currently.
We have a lot of sponsors on the show. They are not one, and I swear by it. And I really only take on sponsors that I believe in anyways. Every once in a while, one squeaks in, and then I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? But, where can they find you? Instagram?
RobbWolf.com. I'm over at drinkelement.com. I have social media accounts, but I'm not there. Like I give stuff to my assistant, she posts it, and I've kind of pulled the ripcord on interacting with folks.
I don't blame you. Yeah. And you do a podcast though.
Yes, my wife and I still do the Healthy Rebellion radio podcast where we answer Q&A each week. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, I can't thank you enough. And everybody listening, thank you. I didn't get to your questions because Rob has to pee. But I hope I asked most of them during the show. But you just didn't get credit. And you guys, my shows this week, I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. I get to fly to Omaha tomorrow. Come see me at the Funny Bone. Next week, I'm at the Las Vegas at the MGM all week. Make sure you have your vaccine because I don't think they're letting you in without it. And that's it. Rate, review, comment. Thanks for listening to the show. And see you next week with we got the CrossFit Games champion, Justin Medeiros, on next week.